Simone Achebe was 39 years old the evening. A man in a black blazer put his hand on her arm in the lobby of the Whitmore Grand and told her that her name was not on the guest list and that she would need to step outside. She let him finish his sentence. She was a woman who let people finish their sentences, not out of deference, but out of the professional habit of collecting the full data before responding to it. She stood in that lobby in a dress the color of deep burgundy and her grandmother's gold earrings, and the particular stillness that comes from understanding a situation more completely than anyone else in the room. Then she said, quietly, to the man in the black blazer, "Could you let Mr. Okafor know I'm here?" He was her head of venue operations. He had worked for her for 7 years. The man in the black blazer made the call. She watched his expression change when he received the response. She watched the change happen in stages. Confusion first, then a rapid recalibration, then the specific discomfort of a person who has put their hand on the arm of the person who signs the deed. Her ex-husband, Desmond Whitfield, had arranged for security to remove her. He was on the event committee. He had apparently reviewed the guest list personally and flagged her name and done what men do when they believe the room belongs to them and the woman they have discarded is merely visiting. He did not know she owned the room. He did not know she owned the building. He did not know she owned the hospitality group that operated it, or the holding company beneath the group, or that the Whitmore Grand had been part of Simone's quietly assembled portfolio for 4 years, acquired 18 months before the divorce and never, not once, mentioned in his presence. What Desmond Whitfield knew about his ex-wife was the version of her she had agreed, for 7 years of marriage, to let him see. He had been wrong about almost every part of it. The Gala's event director found her in the lobby 40 seconds later, speaking in a low, urgent voice that Simone recognized as the voice of someone who has discovered an enormous error and is hoping to contain it before it becomes structural. What happened next would take 11 minutes and cost Desmond Whitfield considerably more than his dignity. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The mornings in Atlanta came in soft in October, the light arriving through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Simone's East Side condominium with the gradual certainty of something that did not need to announce itself. She sat at the kitchen island before 7 with her coffee and the financial summary from her portfolio manager that arrived in her inbox every morning at 6:45, a single-page document she had requested in that format, because she believed that anything requiring more than 1 page to summarize was not yet fully understood. She had learned that from her grandfather. Solomon Achebe had come to the United States from Nigeria in 1969 with an engineering degree, $40, and a belief that the correct way to build anything was quietly, correctly, and without concern for whether anyone was watching. He had spent 20 years in construction management and then pivoted, slowly and deliberately, into commercial real estate development across the Southeast, accumulating properties with the same methodical patience he had applied to every other undertaking in his life. He had told Simone, when she was 10 years old, and had shown him the business plan she wrote for a lemonade stand that covered projected costs, revenue, and seasonal demand variation. "Simone, you understand something that most people never learn. A thing does not have to be visible to be real. Build it right, and it will hold whether or not anyone is looking." He had died 6 years ago at 82, still reviewing property documents at his kitchen table, and had left Simone both the portfolio he had built and the philosophy that had built it. She had spent the years since his death expanding it. Carefully, without noise, the object on her kitchen island beside the portfolio summary was a small framed photograph. Her grandfather at a groundbreaking ceremony in 1984, wearing a hard hat that did not fit quite right and looking at the ground being broken with the expression of a man who was already seeing what would stand on it. She had kept it in every office and every kitchen she had inhabited since his death. It was to her a working document as much as any lease agreement. She worked as a corporate architect for a mid-sized firm that handled institutional projects, hospitals, university buildings, municipal facilities. She was good at it, and the work was genuine and demanding, and she had no intention of leaving it. Because her grandfather had always told her that visible, competent work was its own form of credibility, and that a woman who could point to a building and say she had designed it possessed a kind of authority that could not be dissolved by circumstance. Her portfolio was known to her attorney, her accountant, her portfolio manager, and 4 other people she trusted completely. It was not known to Desmond. She had met Desmond Whitfield 8 years ago at a charity auction where they had both bid on the same architectural print, and he had won it, and turned to her and said, with genuine warmth, that she had better taste than anyone else in the room. She had found this disarming because it was true, and because he had seen it. He was a corporate event planner at the time, building a consultancy that arranged high-end galas and fundraisers for Atlanta's professional and social organizations. He was charming in the easy, practiced way of someone who had made charm into a professional skill, and then begun to believe the skill was the same as the quality. She had found the distinction less visible at the beginning than she did later. They had married after 2 years. The first 3 years of the marriage had been workable. The second 3 had been a slow erosion of the kind that happens when a man who needs to be the largest thing in a room begins to understand, without being able to name it precisely, that the woman he married is not diminished by his presence the way he had assumed she would be. He had not responded to this discovery generously. He had begun to fill the space she occupied with commentary about it, quiet, persistent commentary about her choices, her work, her friends, the way she spent her time, the professional relationships she maintained that he had decided were too close, or too independent, or too much her own. She had listened to the commentary for 1.5 years with the patience she applied to all processes that required more time than she would have chosen to give them. Then, she had stopped. The early signal she had dismissed longest was his habit of introducing her at events as my wife, who works in architecture, in a tone that made architecture sound like a pleasant hobby rather than a profession that required 4 years of graduate study and a state licensure exam, and the ability to design structures that would carry weight safely for the next 100 years. She had corrected it once, clearly and without edge, and he had apologized and done it again at the next event. She had noted this and set it in the place where she kept things that were still accruing data. The signal she had set aside most deliberately was a conversation she had overheard in the 2nd year of the marriage at a dinner party at his colleague's house. He had been speaking with a man she did not know, and the subject was the portfolio. Desmond knew, in general terms, that she had inherited real estate holdings from her grandfather, but he had never asked the specific scope of it, and she had never offered it. Because his tone when the subject had come up in their first year of dating had been the tone of a man cataloging an asset rather than expressing curiosity about a person. At the dinner party he had said, in the easy way of a man speaking to someone he believed was a peer, and she was not, that it was a few properties, nothing major. Her grandfather had been a small developer. She had heard this from across the room and had gone back to her conversation without indicating that she had heard it. She had noted it the way she noted a structural assessment that confirmed something she had already suspected. By the time that folder was full, she had a picture of a man who loved the idea of a capable woman more than he loved the reality of one, and the picture was complete enough to act on. She had filed in March. He had contested it on grounds that had not survived the discovery process. The divorce had been final for 14 months. The Gala invitation had arrived in her name as majority owner of the Akebe Hospitality Group, which held the operating lease for the Whitmore Grand. Her events manager had flagged it as a matter of routine courtesy, the sort of invitation extended to a building owner for an event of this size and profile. She had set it aside for a week, and then, on a Tuesday morning with her coffee and her portfolio summary, decided she would attend. Not for confrontation. She was not a woman who organized her life around confrontations. She would attend because the building was hers, and the evening was a professional obligation, and because she had, after 14 months, no particular reason to arrange her presence around Desmond Whitfield's comfort. She had RSVP'd through her events manager. She had not announced herself as anything other than an attending guest. She had worn the burgundy dress and her grandmother's earrings and driven herself. She had not called anyone to say where she was going. She had not needed to. She was done being something smaller than she was for an audience that had never deserved the performance. She had understood what was happening before the security guard finished his sentence. She had seen Desmond across the lobby when she first entered. He was near the cocktail reception tables, with a woman she did not recognize, and 3 men she recognized as members of the Gala committee. And he had seen her at almost the same moment, and what crossed his face in that instant was not anger, but the specific panic of a man who has believed he has controlled an environment and found a variable he did not account for. The panic lasted approximately 1 second. Then, the composure returned. The professional composure she recognized from their years together. The composure of a man who had spent his career managing events and understood how to rearrange a situation before it became visible to a room. The security guard had appeared within 90 seconds. She had let him finish his sentence. Her face remained perfectly calm throughout. This was not performance. She was calm because the situation was, from her perspective, a logistics problem, a matter of information not having reached the correct party in the correct form. And logistics problems were what she was trained for. She was standing quietly in the center of the lobby when Kofi Okafor, her head of venue operations, arrived from the corridor that led to the management offices, still wearing his event headset, moving with the quiet urgency of a man who had received information that required immediate attention and who understood from 20 years in the hospitality industry that the way you responded to unexpected situations in public spaces was swiftly and without drama. He was 51, Nigerian-American, and had been with the Ashebe Hospitality Group since Simone's grandfather ran it, which meant he had known Simone since she was 19 years old and had never, in that entire span, seen her require rescue from anything. He had, however, seen her receive information calmly and act on it precisely, which was why he had arrived at a near jog from a management corridor and presented himself to the security guard with the unruffled authority of a man who had not been surprised in a professional context in many years. He stepped forward and addressed the security guard with the brief, clear authority of a man resolving a misclassification on a manifest. "This is Miss Akabe," he said. "She is the owner of this property. Please inform your supervisor and remove the hold on her access." The security guard looked at Kofi. He looked at Simone. He made a second call, shorter than the first, and his expression during it had the quality of a man understanding, in real time, that the floor of the situation had shifted. Simone thanked him, without irony, for doing his job. She meant it. He had been given incorrect information and had acted on it professionally. That was not his error. She had always believed in the distinction between the system and the person operating within it, and she applied it now with the same consistency she applied to everything. The event director, a woman named Petra, who had contracted with the Whitmore Grand for 2 years and who had built a reputation on the quality of her events and was now watching that reputation pass through a very uncomfortable moment. arrived and introduced herself with the brisk warmth of a professional who had encountered unexpected situations before and knew that the correct response was competence, not apology. She offered Simone her reserved seat, which was at a table near the front of the room, and confirmed that her name had appeared on the official building owner courtesy list that Petra's team maintained independently from the event committee's guest list. Desmond Whitfield had removed her from the event committee's list. He had not known about the building owner list. He had not known there was a building owner list. He had not known, Simone reflected as she accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and followed Petra toward the main hall, that there were many categories of list on which her name appeared that had nothing to do with his. She was watching. She had always been watching. That had never required anyone else's permission. Simone had not arranged for anything. She wanted to be clear about that. To herself and to the story, she had not orchestrated an exposure or designed a public moment or planned the sequence of what came next. What came next was simply the consequence of accurate information occupying the same room as a man who had arranged his entire understanding of his situation around inaccurate information. The collision was structural. It was not theatrical. She had, 3 days before the gala, told her grandfather's oldest colleague, Dr. Effiong, who came to the AKB Group offices every Thursday, and who had known Simone since she was a girl, and who was the person she trusted to tell her plainly when she was being foolish, that she intended to attend the event. She had explained the invitation, the building, Desmond's presence on the committee, and her reasoning for going. Dr. Effiong had listened with his hands folded on his walking stick and then looked at her for a long moment. He was 80 years old, and he had the gift, accumulated over decades, of saying the most important thing in the fewest words available. "You are going because it is yours," he said. "Yes," she said. "Then go. Be exactly what you are. Nothing more and nothing less." She had driven to the Whitmore Grand that evening wearing her grandmother's earrings and been exactly what she was. The rest had arranged itself accordingly. She was seated at her table, speaking with a foundation director she had met through a professional conference 3 years prior, when the gala's MC made the opening remarks and, as was standard practice at events of this type held in a privately owned venue, acknowledged the hospitality partner and property owner. "We are grateful this evening to the Ashebi Hospitality Group and to Miss Simone Akebe for providing this extraordinary space." The room responded warmly. People looked toward the table near the front. Simone inclined her head with the composed grace of someone who has been acknowledged in professional settings before and understands that the appropriate response is genuine but not excessive. Across the room, Desmond Whitfield was standing at his committee table. She did not look at him directly. She did not need to. She was aware of him the way she was aware of a structural element in a building she had designed. She knew where it was and what it was doing, and she did not need to stare at it to know. He came to her table at the 45-minute mark. He came alone. He had the expression of a man who has spent 45 minutes revising a calculation and is not yet sure of the new answer. He was wearing the good gray suit she remembered and a tie she did not, and he held his drink with both hands in the way of someone who needs something to hold because the room has become uncertain beneath them. He said her name. She looked at him with the calm, complete patience of someone who has all the time available and is choosing to spend a portion of it on this. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't." He looked at the room. He looked at the banner near the stage where the AKB Hospitality Group logo was printed in navy and gold. He looked at Kofi across the hall, who was speaking with the catering director and who glanced over once with the professional non-expression of a man who had no comment to add to whatever was unfolding at table 4. "Why didn't you tell me?" Desmond said. She considered the question honestly, the way she considered all questions. "You never asked," she said. "You told me, consistently, what you thought I was. You decided what I was worth from the surface, and stopped there. You didn't ask what I was. Those are different activities. One requires curiosity, and one does not." He was quiet. She could see him looking for the angle in the room that still belonged to him, and finding none. "You had me removed from the guest list," she said. Not as an accusation, as a statement of fact, the way she might note a discrepancy in a building inspection. "I want you to understand that I'm not angry about that. I'm noting it. It told me something accurate about your assessment of this situation, which is the same assessment you had of me for the last several years of our marriage. I think we're both better served by accuracy than by any other kind of conversation." His jaw tightened slightly. He tried one more position. "You could have said something. At any point." "I could have," she agreed simply. "And I chose, for my own reasons, not to. That was my choice to make. This evening was the consequence of yours." She looked at him with the clear, untroubled steadiness of someone who has finished a structural assessment and found the building sound. "I hope the rest of your evening is good, Desmond. I mean that." She turned back to her table. She resumed her conversation with the foundation director, who had the professional discretion not to have appeared to notice anything, and the human curiosity of someone who had noticed everything, and who would remember this particular evening for quite some time. Desmond Whitfield returned to his table. He did not approach her again. By 10:15, Simone was in her car, with her grandmother's earrings held loosely in one hand, and the Atlanta night moving past the windows with its ordinary, unhurried certainty. She had not gloated. She had not performed. She had simply been present and accurate, and that had been, as it always was, entirely sufficient. 12 months later, Simone sat at the long table in her grandfather's old conference room, the room she had converted from a storage space in the building's second-floor offices into a working meeting space with a window that looked out over the east side of Atlanta, and walls lined with the original architectural drawings from his first 4 developments. Framed and lit as the working history they were. The Ashebe Hospitality Group had opened 2 new properties in the preceding year, both in markets her grandfather had always said were underserved, and that the numbers confirmed were ready. She had attended the groundbreaking for the second one in September wearing a hard hat that did not fit quite right, and someone on her staff had taken a photograph, and she had put it on her desk beside the photograph of her grandfather, a man named Marcus, a commercial real estate attorney she had met through a transaction in the spring, and who had, over the months since, become present in her life with the steady, unhurried quality of someone who was interested in what she was building and not threatened by the scale of it. Sat across the table reading a document she had asked him to review. He was 43 and precise, and had met her grandfather's oldest colleague, a man named Dr. Effiong, who was 80 years old and still came to the office on Thursdays, and Dr. Effiong had told Simone afterward, "He reads before he speaks. Your grandfather valued that in a person." Simone had filed that where it belonged. Desmond had moved his consultancy to a smaller office in a less prominent part of the city. The Gala committee he had co-chaired had not renewed his contract for the following year's event. The reasons given were described by the committee chair as organizational, which was the professional word for a set of events that had made certain things visible that had previously been invisible. He was not ruined. She had not aimed at ruination and would not have wanted it. But his map of the territory had been corrected, and the correction was permanent. She had heard this through Kofi, who had heard it through channels that existed in the professional hospitality world, because the professional hospitality world, like all professional worlds, was smaller than it appeared from the outside. She registered it. She moved on before the conversation was finished. She held her coffee and looked at her grandfather's photograph on the wall. The hard hat, the ground, the expression of a man seeing what would stand there before it existed. She thought about what he had told her when she was 10 years old and had shown him the plan for the lemonade stand with the seasonal demand projections. A thing does not have to be visible to be real. Build it right and it will hold whether or not anyone is looking. She had built it right. She was certain of that. It was holding exactly as designed. She was solvent. She was free. She was, in every sense her grandfather had intended and built toward, exactly where she was always going. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.